myself, okay, or picture two women in a boxing ring. There's 2,000 people surrounding this boxing ring, okay? And half of the people in the audience are boo, and the other half are just sort of half clapping. And these two women are standing across from each other, and they're like, what? How in the world did we get here? Well, I was one of those women in that boxing ring. I was standing there with golden gloves in 1998. I was 24, almost 25 years old, just a couple of years ago, right? Yeah. Anyway, so I'm standing across from my opponent, and I look at her, and I'm like, what are we doing? And she's like, I don't know. And I'm thinking to myself, Leanna, you signed up for this. You signed your name on the dotted line, and you signed up for this. And I just think, my goodness. And I'm standing there terrified, because here I am, and I have to go at it with this other lady in front of 2,000 people, and half of them are booing, okay, because we're women, right? And it's the first time they ever allowed women in the Golden Gloves, and of course, we don't have the situations we have now that are currently going on, but we had women against women and men against men, okay? So anyways, I'm there, and I'm thinking to myself, Leanna, you should have really rethought this. You should not have signed up for this. And I realized at that moment, this is the only time I'm ever going to step in a boxing ring ever again in front of 2,000 people, because I'm not doing this again. And you realize you get into a situation, you realize, I'm not doing this again, okay? But I actually signed up for this. So I'm going to end that. I'm going to finish this at the end of that story at the very end, because I want to tie this into our message. The message I entitled is "Trading Ashes for Beauty: The Story of Bathsheba." How many in here have ever heard a scathing message about Bathsheba from some minister? Have you ever heard scathing messages? What a terrible person she was, and yada, yada, yada. Well, I thought to myself, well, I should research this lady and find out all about her, because she's fascinating. A few years back, we were doing some women's things at our church, and they said, pick a woman in the Bible you'd like to minister about. And I thought, we got Mary, we got Esther, we have all these women with our amazing women of God. And I said, what about Bathsheba? What's her story? So as I began to research and culturally find out a bunch of stuff about her, every message I ever heard that was scathing or bad was completely turned around. Because I realized this was a woman that was taken advantage of. This was a woman who was in a situation that she could not control. So, just what we heard with Angie, many of us, have you ever been forced to do something you didn't want to do? You've been forced to do something you didn't want to do? Have you been violated in some way that has left you scarred and hopeless? A lot of us have. And sometimes it's our decisions that we made that get us in that situation that sometimes we're our worst enemies, right? Sometimes we're our worst, we're the ones that can cause that to come upon us. Just like me stepping in the boxing ring, I signed up for that. And then realizing, whoa, this is not really what I thought it was going to be. I don't know what I thought it was going to be. Isn't that like sin? The devil leads you to the end of to the edge. He's like, come on, jump, come on, jump. Just jump. And then you jump, and then he's like, you stupid. Why'd you do that? You should told me to jump. It's sort of like the same thing. I'm standing in this boxing ring going, what am I doing? Why am I here? And so, how have you sought God to rise up from the depths of the ashes to walk into your destiny? Because a lot of times we have ashes to present to God. We have, God, all this is ashes. But let me tell you what the beautiful thing is. Ashes, do you know the purest form of ash is? It's baking soda. I was telling this to Melissa the other day. Baking soda is the purest white that you can get on earth. Not only that, but baking soda you can cook with. You can clean. It's one of the best cleansing agents there is. So when you have come from the ash, I always take it into baking soda. God can take that. He goes, all right, you got ashes? Great. Now I can use you. Now it's time to step into that destiny. Sometimes we self-inflict ourselves, like I was saying, in the boxing ring. But other times we are sinned against. God sees the scars, the tears, the headache, the heartache, desperation that you have gone through, and He wants to raise you up from the depths of the ashes to set your feet on the road to destiny. Just like Joseph went from a prideful brother. I always think about Joseph. Y'all like the story of Joseph? Okay. Well, I think I was like, you are so young and just... why did you say those things to your brothers or your older brother? Don't you know they could beat you up? I mean, and all the things that Joseph said, but God used that time. He went from a prideful brother who was sold into slavery and then rose to second in command in Egypt. The Lord can raise you up as well. So, there's a lot of scripture, and I'm not going to go over it all, but we're going to start as Bathsheba. Who was Bathsheba related to? David's top 37 men of valor are in his army. Her husband, Uriah the Hittite, he was probably around 40 years old, a man that was probably converted by David. Her father, who was also part of, Bathsheba's father was part of one of David's top men, Eliam, one of David's 30 mighty warriors who were the most important in his army. Also Bathsheba's grandfather, Ahithophel, I'm not exactly sure how that's pronounced, the father of Eliam. He also revolted against David when David's son rebelled against him. Since the importance of these two men, it's possible that David knew Bathsheba when she was a young girl. It's very possible. She grew up around the palace. She had been raised in one of the most influential and well-to-do homes in Israel as a noble birth. So that, number one, that sets Bathsheba apart from just any ordinary woman out there scathingly bathing that we've heard, okay? So the name Bathsheba means seventh oath, or daughter of seven. Daughter of abundance, the daughter of satiety, satisfied, complete, fullness, the number of completion. So I found that very interesting too. She was the seventh daughter, so which number is 7 represents completion and it represents perfection. How old was Bathsheba? Between the ages of 16 and 19 years old. How old was David? In his 50s. Boy, that changes your perspective, right? She was a young woman who had been raised to fear God. Bathsheba was identified by her relation to a man. In fact, she's identified in respect of both her father and her husband. She was a respectable woman because she was named by her male relative. So that shows that this woman was raised noble birth as well as in a respectable home as a respectable young woman, which is kind of the opposite of some of the things I've heard before. She was also considered a woman with no name. She was always considered after the fact of the man that she was related to. Bathsheba had been unjustly criticized and judged by a number of people. She is described as a seductress by some, a conniving political opportunist by others. Have y'all heard that? I've heard that before. So, here David was. We're setting the stage. I'm going to go over here. I've got some of the scriptures here. David was, here we have, in the spring, in 2 Samuel 11, 1 through 5. I'm going to go over that. Then it happened in the spring, at the time when the kings will go to battle, that David sent Joab his servants with him and all the fighting men in Israel, and they destroyed the Amorites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained in Jerusalem. One evening,
David got up from his couch and was walking on the flat or the roof of the king's palace. And from there he saw a young woman bathing, and she was very beautiful in appearance. So David made an effort, number one, to be lazy when he should have been out to battle. Do you know when they would go to battle, you know what they would do? They would take the Ark of the Covenant. What carried the Ark of the Covenant? God's presence. So the God's presence was over here. David remained to stay here. He just got lazy. I'm successful. God's presence is over there. They can handle it. They can handle it. So I'm just to chill out over here on this roof. But David made an effort. David sent word and inquired about the woman. Someone said, "Is this not Bathsheba, the son of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" So David knew right away. They said, "Oh, that's Eliam's daughter and Uriah's wife." Like basically, why are you inquiring about her? And David sent messengers and took her. Took her. Took her is a violent word. They didn't just there was no, "Hey, King needs you to come. Would you come? He's inviting you to come and see him." No, it's a violent word. That word "took" is like violently taking her. Imagine armed guards on all sides. So they took her. The woman, David sent messengers and he took her. When she came to him, he lay with her. And when she was purified of her uncleanness, she returned to her house. The woman conceived and sent word to David, "I am pregnant." Okay, so David was on the top of the largest buildings in Jerusalem. He was at a huge vantage point over Bathsheba. Bathsheba probably had no idea she was being watched. David got lazy, should have been with the kings out to war and not at home. Now, let's go to Bathsheba's bath. Everybody says Bathsheba. Does that mean she was bathing? There's a lot of jokes around that. But Bathsheba was bathing. She would not have been naked. Culturally, any upstanding, noble Jewish woman would have never been bathing in public naked. They would have been covered. She would have been covered from the neck all the way down. She would have been wearing like a sarong, a wrap, a bathing gown, is what they would call it. So this woman was like what we have heard. I've heard messages, "Oh, she was brazen out there naked and, open before everybody." No, she would not have culturally been naked. She would have been completely clothed because that would have been what a respectable woman would have done. Now, we don't know if she was at a well, a spring, a river, or she was bathing in her own home, or even washing herself in a bowl of water. Perhaps on the roof or in the courtyard. We do not know, but it was evening. The usual time for bathing, which was the usual time. So anybody would have been doing it at that time, but David made an effort. Let me get my eyes out there and see who I can see. All right? He was people watching. So the light level may have been pretty low. It was more than likely that Bathsheba was neither naked or brazenly exposed when she was bathing. Bathsheba's part was a ritual of the 7 days after her menstruation. So it was her time of cleansing. And she would have probably not been married very long because she was not married long enough to get pregnant. So here's this young girl between the age of 16 and 19 years old, had been married for a very short time, because her husband was probably out to war more than he had been home. And then David saw her, took advantage of her. So then there was this, we see the royal summons, right? She comes in. Bathsheba seduced and forced by power to have relations with David. Did Bathsheba have a choice? Do you think she had a choice? No. Could she have refused the king's messengers who had come with a royal summons? Could she have refused the king's sexual advances? Most of the time when that was happening, when there was this, they call it a power rape, when that was happening, that woman had no choice. It was either, I have relations with him, or I'm killed. This was in that situation. It was like, I'm between a rock and a hard place, so I might as well just do the hard place. Okay, that happens a lot in people's lives. It happens a lot in our lives. Now, she was probably powerless to refuse the king. She was seduced and power raped, as they call it, an act that is equivalent to rape. She returns home defiled and then pregnant. So David expected Bathsheba just to resume her life just as normal, Uriah's life. Okay, I've had my relations, I had my fun, I do what I want to do, everything's out to war, like everything's a secret, right? Secret. So I really, it's kind of funny what happened next. So David realizes he's in big trouble because she sends word back, hey, I'm pregnant. And so I can imagine David's like, oh my goodness, I got to take care of this problem. Okay, I got a solution. How many of us, we get in this situation, we sin, we lie, we go, and we're like, okay, I got a solution, no problem, we're going to use another lie to cover up this lie, okay? So he says Joab, which is the head of David's army, call Uriah home. I need to get a report from him and how things are going because Uriah was on the front lines in that area. So he calls him home, hey, how's the things going? And so Uriah is telling him and this, and he's like, okay, now go home and see your wife. Have a happy time with your wife. So he sends him out. Guess what happens? Uriah says he sleeps in front of the palace. He refuses to go home to his wife. And David's like, hey, why are you here? He's like, the Ark of the Covenant. I love what Uriah said. The Ark of the Covenant. God's presence is out there. And those men are fighting. I cannot leave. I cannot go and have pleasure with my wife. I cannot stay here and have pleasure with you. I need to be out there fighting. And all of a sudden, David realizes, okay, wait, whoa, another plan. He gets Uriah drunk. And then he says, then he'll go home. Nope, didn't happen. So after that, David's like, oh boy, okay. So, unknown to the rest of society, probably Bathsheba would, if she being from a respectable family, would not have told anybody, none of her family, yeah, the king got me pregnant. We had these relations. I mean, imagine how broken this woman was. Like, how is this going to be? How are we going to cover this? I mean, and then she's put in a situation of, I'm the one that has to foot the bill now. I'm the one that's got to carry this baby. So then after that, Bathsheba is, I imagine she's just in this like, I can't imagine what the sorrow of this woman is feeling. So her husband comes back, he goes back out to war, then David's like, I got another idea. So he tells Joab, his right-hand army man, put Uriah at the front. So Joab knows, okay, this is a trick to get this man killed. So sure enough, I'm going through this really quick here, but this is how this story unfolds, and all of a sudden, Uriah goes out and he gets killed. Okay, and so word gets back to David, okay, this guy's been killed. And so I imagine David's like, whew, man, solve that problem. Whew, no problem. Bring me Bathsheba back. That cute looking girl, and bring her back and let's get married. And we'll cover this whole thing. Now that one of his right-hand men, which was Uriah, okay, let's do the honorable thing and marry his wife. Because they would, what if this brother would die, the next one would marry him, or this one would marry this one, okay, like on and on, right? Okay, so then she comes in. And I'm sure by now, okay, she's pretty much carried full term. And I'm sure David's like, whew, I got away with that one. Whew, got away with murder, Next thing is, and I'm telling you what, these prophets in the Old Testament, they had some cojones. They were like, these guys were tough, okay? Nathan the prophet comes in and he's like, hey David, I got a word with you. I need to tell you a story. And he's like, yeah, I mean, sure. And then he respected Nathan the prophet. He's like, yeah. What is it? He's like, well, I want to tell you this story. He's like, there was this rich, there was two men in the city. One was rich and the other one was poor. The rich one had a very large flock, lots of herds, tons and tons and tons. Anything that he wanted, he could have the best of the best of the best. But the poor man had only but one little lamb, which he purchased and nourished, and it grew up with him and his children. It ate and it drank from his cup. It lay in his arms, and he called it basically like he was his own daughter. He said, now the traveler who was rich, and to avoid taking one of his own flock, because he had so many of them, to prepare a meal for the traveler who came to him, he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for his guest. Oh, and then all of a sudden, because David, he's that sin is gone, as he's married Bathsheba, she's about to deliver this baby, everything's good, nobody knows a thing. Then in David's anger, he intensely is against the man. He said to Nathan, as the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die. He shall make restitution for this lamb 4 times as much as the lamb is worth, because he did this thing. Then Nathan said to David, you are the man. Thus says the Lord of Israel, you and your master's house, and you put your master's wife into your care and under your protection, and gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if there had been too little, I would have given you much more. Basically, he's saying, David, this is you. And what I love about David, okay, because David made a lot of mistakes just like the rest of us. David knew how to repent. He knew how to repent. He knew how to get his heart right with the Lord. So one amazing thing that's redeeming about this story with Bathsheba, and the way that God redeems our life from destruction, that years later, so okay, Bathsheba gave birth, that babe, Nathan came in and said that baby's going to die. That baby of sin. So what happened is that baby died, right? So we don't know how far between that baby's death and Solomon's birth, but it is probably, I'd say, a good year or two. So she birthed Solomon. Now Solomon was the son of oath. Now here's an interesting thing I found out in history, is that Solomon, of all of David's children, Solomon and his brothers were the only ones that were schooled, basically homeschooled, by Nathan the prophet. These boys were set apart because Bathsheba was set apart in her walk with the Lord. When all of this sin started to come out and everybody began to see this, Bathsheba would have been one that would have been completely shunned to the other side of the palace. Her family would have shunned her. Her love, all of her loved ones, her friends, anybody that knew her could not be associated with her any longer, as well as all the other queens in the palace. So this woman was completely ostracized and completely alone. So it's like when I put myself in that position, I think to what happened to Bathsheba in a year. She was forced into do something she didn't want to do. She became pregnant. She became widowed. She marries David, the murderer of her husband. And then she gives birth to a baby. And the baby dies. That's 9 months of living hell. Can you imagine? Like, can you really imagine? And at the time, when God reveals to Nathan the prophet, this is what happened. Both David and Bathsheba could have both been stoned to death. But I love God's redeeming grace in that David was like, I am responsible. He took the responsibility. That is where God's redeeming grace, then that covered Bathsheba. He's like, no, it was me. It was me the whole time. I killed her husband. I seduced her to be with me. I did all of this. Now, anybody ever read Proverbs 31? Okay, raise your hand. I bet everyone in here has read Proverbs 31. did Solomon write Proverbs 31 about? His mother. Who was his mother? Bathsheba. That's a wise woman. Even though all these things had been done to this young lady, she grew up and honored David, even though those transgressions were made early on. And in history, this is just stuff I found out in history. I've searched it up. Throughout history, Bathsheba was summoned more to David's private chambers more than any other wife or concubine. She was also the most beautiful. She was one that he protected the most. I find that very interesting. I think he knew his sin early on, and he realized it, and he says, you know what? I need to protect this woman. That was a huge event. I mean, it takes up several chapters of the Bible in 2 Samuel, this story. This was a transgression that, I mean, sexual sin back in the day, I mean, with especially in the Jewish culture, my goodness. I mean, it was as bad as death or murder. And so what I find so redeeming is that God took this beautiful woman, raised her up. I call her a queen mother. Many years passed, and Nathan tells Bathsheba about the oath. He says David made an oath that Solomon would become king. Solomon was the richest king to ever live and the wisest king to ever live. Mostly because of his wisdom, he became wealthy. Solomon made a lot of mistakes, and he had a lot of wives and concubines. But in the very end, what did he say in Ecclesiastes? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Because in the end, I have to trust God. And so I think, Lord, how amazing you are to now raise this woman up, to have birthed, raised the wisest, wealthiest king to ever live. Look what God can do. Now, in Jesus' genealogies, and I found this interesting too, that both Solomon and his brother Nathan were both in his genealogy. What I find very interesting is that Bathsheba is both in Mary and Joseph lineage. The number 2 means together, partnership, relationships, and harmony. Why did Jesus come? He came for relationship. Why did he die? For relationship. In Matthew's genealogy, 4 women are mentioned, and 3 by name: Tamar, Rahab, and Ruth. And Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah, even though she was married to King David when she conceived and gave birth to Solomon. So of the 4 women in his genealogy, she was the only one that remained nameless, but with honor, because she was referred to by her husband. So I gave you all the real condensed version because I did a lot of study, and it's been very exciting to learn about Bathsheba. So knowing that if sin has taken us down a road like that God can redeem. It may not happen at this moment, and you may not quite understand it. You may not get it. You may not like, God, I don't know why I'm at where I'm at. I don't know why this has happened to me. But God can take you up. He can raise you up if you will trust Him. I can imagine the sorrow that she felt. I can imagine the depths of her heart and where it fell. But then at the end, you see her faithfulness to God. And sometimes, someone will tell you, man, I love your kids. Man, they're great. It's because they have a good mom. They have a praying mom. They're not perfect, right? Our kids aren't perfect, but they have they have a mom that loves them, a mom that's praying. And imagine that through Solomon's life, Bathsheba was a praying mother. She was going to make sure those boys got schooled by Nathan the prophet. And as I end, I'm gonna end this story, the boxing story. So there I was, standing across from my opponent, and how did I get there? Okay, that didn't happen overnight, right? We don't step into a situation, into the boxing ring overnight. So what happened is, about 6 weeks earlier, my pastor's son-in-law, who happened to be a boxing coach in Houston, now moved to Corpus, opened a boxing gym, and he says, "Hey, Leanna, how would you like $1,000 for college?" And I was like, well, yeah, I was going to college at the time. Who couldn't use $1,000? Even now, I'll take $1,000. That might pay for a class, but hey, I'll take the $1,000. So I said, yeah, well, what do I do? And he says, well, I promise, I promise you won't get a fight, but this is the first year they're allowing women in the Golden Clubs. All you got to do is sign your name on the dotted line, and I promise you probably won't even get a fight because no other women are going to sign up. And I was like, okay, all right, deal. He's like, but you might want to work out because who knows, you might just get a fight. And I was like, well, okay, yeah, I probably won't. Nah, no one's gonna. Yeah, right. I mean, hey, okay. So then, guess what? I go and I tell Terry, who's my husband's sister. Okay. Terry, guess what? I tell her the whole thing, and she's like, oh, that's wonderful. She goes, I could use $1,000 for college too. And I was like, great. Well, let's start working out together. So we start working out, and we would get in the ring, and we would spar, and we would dance around. Yeah, you see the boxers dance around. And I was like, I don't want to hit her. And then she goes, I don't want to hit her. And our coach is like, well, you better get in there and hit each other. Well, she took the first swing, and I was like, that's it. Come on, bring it on, y'all. I'm ready to fight. So we continue to work out. Well, she's a few years older than me, but she's like 4 inches taller than me. I'm 5'4". Well, I was 5'4" at the time, and maybe she's 5 inches taller than me. She's 5'9", and she has this like much longer reach and 2 inches on each hand, So we go to work out, and they said, well, the day comes to sign in, because you have to do a sign-in day, a weigh-in day, where they weigh you and this and that. So we're out there, we're signing in. Well, lo and behold, guess what? Terry and I are both in the same age and weight class. So guess what? My opponent, who I'm looking across the ring at, is my sister-in-law. There's some people that would say, I'd love to get my sister-in-law in the ring. But we like each other. We love each other, actually. And so we go in, and prior, it's like a week or so, we were interviewed by every television network or local television. We were in the newspaper. We were all over. It would have been social media at the time, but we didn't have social media in the 90s. So so we got all those interviews in Telemundo, and they were interviewing us. And so we're in the ring, and bing, 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 the bell goes off. We go in, and we look like rock'em sock'em robots. We have our ponytails sticking out of the top of our head with our headgear around, and we're like this. We have a video somewhere. I need to find it, seriously. Is it? So only thing I remember is my head doing this, and my face hurting, and anyways, I ended up winning. I don't know how, only by points, because I got down out of the ring, and I was like, I will never do that again. And Terry was like, I'm ready for the next fight. I'm ready for the next fight. I'm like, nope, not doing that again. We were at the Whataburger, and she's talking about going on the next fight, and I was like, no way, girl. But guess what? She came back the next year, and she bit the tar out of that little girl. She did it 2 years in a row. So I'm really proud of her. But anyways, that is my boxing story for those of you who wanted to hear it before. I won't do it again. And I think that's the way life is. A lot of times we get into situations and going, wisdom is watching somebody else get in the boxing ring and take the punches and go, I'm never going to do that. And someone's smart gets in the boxing ring and is like, I'm not going to do this again, you know. But there's wisdom, there's being wise and there's being smart. I want to be wise. Amen. So I pray, I felt like I really gave y'all the condensed version. I'm realizing that our time is getting short here. Now let's stand up and pray real quick. And I want you to gather around your table.